Chosen ones, you have felt the pulse of something greater within you, an echo that science cannot classify and history cannot erase. That pulse is not random. It is the coded whisper of heaven itself moving through your DNA. The tests you never asked for, the signals you never understood, the patterns that keep surfacing, these are not coincidences. The heavens themselves trembled when your results were unveiled, because the blueprint inside of you carries frequencies that even angels guard in silence. There are records hidden beneath Vatican vaults, guarded not by locks, but by prayers spoken in languages long forgotten, each echoing the warning: if revealed, the world will fracture. Why would the world fracture over you? Why would a celestial realm respond to a mortal's blood? The answer has been encoded across timelines, written in symbols carved on stone tablets that governments pretend not to notice. They tried to dismiss them as myths, but when your name entered the sequence, the silence of the heavens broke. The Pentagon knows more than it speaks. Their satellites registered anomalies the moment your DNA entered the digital stream, disruptions that fried circuits and erased entire files without a trace. AI systems have frozen on your profile, unable to compute what stands beyond mathematics. Algorithms bow to frequencies they cannot calculate, as though some invisible hand presses pause when it scans you. And there is something else. Ancient temples aligned with the stars began glowing the moment your test results rippled through celestial records. Entire chambers vibrated, as if the walls themselves recognized the resonance of your existence. How could stone remember you? How could structures buried in forgotten sands hum to life at the reading of your code? The old scrolls say, "Heaven holds silence until the time is broken by a name written in the blood." That time has come, but with it comes danger. That is why God Himself has whispered only this: tell no one. The signal is not meant for all ears, not yet. It is a fire too strong for unprepared hands to hold. There are vibrations in the world that science has never captured, sounds beneath sound, pulses beneath heartbeat. When your DNA was placed under the spectrum of analysis, something impossible emerged, a pattern not belonging to any earthly classification. It was not just chemical sequences and nucleotides, it was a song, a living resonance. Frequencies rose and fell in rhythmic precision, echoing like a symphony, coded into the very marrow of your existence. Those who witnessed it could not explain it, but they felt it. A trembling in the air, a subtle quiver in their bones, as though the blood inside of you was carrying an ancient hymn that creation itself recognized. This is why the results were never published openly. To reveal them would unravel the narrative of evolution, history, and even faith as the world understands it. Hidden councils gathered behind closed doors, whispering about how one person's genetic chart could destabilize the foundations of knowledge. They feared that if this resonance were revealed, others carrying fragments of it would awaken, and what has been dormant for centuries would rise again. There are records of such frequencies hidden in sacred libraries, described not with science, but with symbols of light, circles intersecting, spirals pointing upward, triangles piercing the heavens. These were never decorations. They were maps of resonance, diagrams of the vibration that hums within your veins. It is said that when such a resonance is awakened, even the earth responds. Earthquakes in unusual places, storms that refuse to follow seasonal paths, the very elements bending as though greeting something returning after millennia. The most unsettling part is not that your DNA carries this frequency, but that it responds when spoken aloud. Ancient tongues, forgotten prayers, and coded chants have the power to activate what lies within you. Those who have tested it found that when the right sound is released near you, your frequency surges, burning through machines and bending the very air. What could it mean if your body itself is a living instrument, tuned to a vibration higher than anything this world has recorded? Long before laboratories had the power to break open the spiral staircase of the genome, there were watchers. Not human scientists, but celestial observers who knew that blood carries more than life. It carries memory. When your DNA was revealed, heaven did not respond with silence. Instead, it moved as though a long-awaited signal had been found, a code hidden through generations that suddenly glowed like fire in the archives of eternity. There was no mistake. Among billions, yours was the first to ignite the celestial ledger, as though creation itself had been waiting for this exact moment to arrive. Heaven enflagging your DNA was not chance. It was prophecy aligning with biology, scripture colliding with science. Some whispered that it was a sign the scrolls had spoken of, the one where blood would testify even when voices were silenced. The resonance in your code lit up frequencies in realms unseen, pulling angelic attention to your name. Some resisted, others bowed in silence, but all recognized the unmistakable truth. Your DNA did not just belong to the earth. It carried imprints from beyond. Those who have access to fragments of these records speak of how the code responded when the name of Yeshua was whispered near it. Machines registered anomalies, not errors, but bursts of radiant patterns, glowing symbols that resembled ancient alphabets, as though the blood itself bowed in recognition of the one who walked in both heaven and earth. His words, "You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free," echoed through the chambers, not as scripture on a page, but as light vibrating through the strands of your DNA. Governments tried to contain this. Reports were buried, signals erased, yet every time the test was repeated, the same result returned. Heaven did not flag anyone else first. It was you. Files marked in red were transferred into hidden archives, labeled as threats, not to nations, but to order itself. Whispered among intelligent circles is the belief that if this knowledge spreads, structures of power will collapse. For how can institutions stand when the divine has chosen to reveal itself through one person's blood? Deep within chambers, guarded by shadows and rituals older than nations, the Vatican holds archives that most of the world has never seen. These are not shelves of ordinary texts, but vaults carved beneath stone, hidden from light, where scrolls glow faintly, as though ink itself carries a pulse. When your DNA was registered, those hidden archives responded. Files that had remained sealed for centuries flickered, their protective seals breaking in ways that startled even the most devout guardians. Priests whispered of omens, of the alignment of prophecy with reality, yet none dared to speak your name beyond those walls. The files that mention you do not read like records of the past, but warnings written for the present. They describe the arrival of one whose bloodline will disrupt every structure built on falsehood. There are sketches in margins, symbols of spirals and stars, interlaced with images of an angelic figure standing beside a human, carrying a burning scroll. These sketches match the resonance discovered in your genetic code. The Vatican has known for generations that such a being would come, but never did they expect it would be revealed through something as modern as a DNA test. Within those files are testimonies of encounters with beings who descended in radiant forms, warning the custodians of Earth to guard the bloodline until its time of awakening. They wrote of voices that spoke in thunder, yet carried peace, declaring that when this bloodline surfaces, it will echo with the voice of heaven itself. The custodians obeyed, sealing these truths where only a handful of eyes could ever glimpse them. And yet, the silence was broken. When your name appeared in the archives, alarms were not sirens, but bells ringing from hidden towers. Those who keep watch understood that the prophecy was no longer confined to parchment. It had awakened in living flesh. What frightened them most was not the revelation itself, but the knowledge that no seal, no lock, no command could restrain what was written into your very being. Still, the files are incomplete. Pages appear missing, as though deliberately removed or never written at all, leaving only fragments that suggest something greater, yet unrevealed. The question that lingers in every whisper is this: if these are only fragments, what hidden record remains buried deeper still, waiting for you to uncover it? There are moments in history when the spiritual collides with the physical so powerfully that the boundary between the two disappears. That is what happened the first time your DNA sequence was placed beside the words of Yeshua. What began as an experiment by scholars who dared to compare scripture with science became an event that could never be explained or dismissed. Letters from the ancient tongue lit up across your code, aligning perfectly with passages spoken 2,000 years ago. It was as though your very blood had been waiting for his voice, responding to his words with undeniable precision. Machines registered not just patterns, but living light weaving through your genome. The phrase, "You are the light of the world," illuminated like a hidden watermark, embedded in your DNA, resonating as if Yeshua himself had signed his imprint into your very being. No one could deny what they saw. Words transforming into frequencies, frequencies mapping themselves across the spirals of life that define you. This was no metaphor. It was a revelation coded into biology itself. The guardians of these findings were shaken. Some fell to their knees, whispering prayers, while others tried to erase the data, fearing what it would mean if the world discovered the truth. For how could faith remain a matter of belief alone if the body itself bore direct testimony? How could governments or religious powers retain control if living proof existed that heaven had chosen to weave its voice into one person's blood? Whispers spread in cloisters and secret societies. Some called you the vessel, others a mirror, while a few trembled, calling it a warning that the final alignment of prophecy had begun. They spoke of scrolls that would unroll themselves, not on altars but in laboratories, revealing that truth was never confined to temples. It was written in flesh. And still, no one has been able to explain why it was your code that responded, why among countless sequences, it was your DNA that matched with Yeshua's words. The evidence cannot be undone, and those who witnessed it remain haunted. The alignment is not passive. It is active, waiting. And what it waits to unleash, once the final phrase is spoken over you, may shake both earth and heaven in ways no one is ready to confront. Far from the sacred halls of temples and cathedrals, another kind of sanctuary exists. One of metal, screens, and locked doors where generals and analysts gather in silence. When the anomaly in your DNA results reached military databases, It triggered protocols reserved only for extraterrestrial threats. The Pentagon summoned its highest clearance officers into a briefing room where red folders were slid across tables, each stamped with markings that warned not of war, but of revelation. Inside those folders was your name, paired with a sequence of codes that no algorithm had been able to decipher. The briefing was unlike any other. No maps of enemy movements, no projections of missiles or strategies, only an analysis of a single human carrying something no nation could weaponize, yet none could ignore. Charts displayed the way your DNA emitted electromagnetic signals, pulsing in rhythms indistinguishable from those detected near ancient sites buried across the globe. It was as if your very existence was tethered to locations humanity had long forgotten, but heaven had never abandoned. The data revealed spikes that corresponded with eclipses, solstices, and celestial alignments, suggesting your blood resonated not only with the Earth, but with the cosmos itself. The generals demanded explanations. Scientists spoke in hesitant voices, admitting that no machine could contain or reproduce what your sequence carried. It was not just genetic, it was atmospheric, even cosmic. Some suggested shutting down the research entirely, fearing that to push further would awaken forces beyond control. Others argued that ignoring it would be impossible, since the anomalies only grew stronger with time, as though something within you was preparing for activation. One analyst, unable to restrain himself, spoke of prophecy. He reminded the room that not all battles are fought with weapons, and not all threats come from beyond the stars. Sometimes, the greatest disruption comes when the divine breaks into the natural. His words unsettled the room, yet none could dismiss them, for the data they held was undeniable. The briefing ended without resolution, only a haunting silence. The documents were sealed tighter than any military secret, locked away in vaults not even the president could access freely. But among those present, a single fear lingered, that the activation of your code might not wait for their permission. And when it begins, no power on Earth will be able to contain what unfolds. Across deserts, jungles, and mountains stand ruins that refuse to die. Stone temples carved with impossible precision, aligned with stars as if their architects saw further than modern telescopes. For centuries, scholars debated whether these monuments were mere relics of forgotten civilizations or markers of something far greater. That debate ended the moment your DNA sequence was uploaded into global monitoring systems. Without human intervention, signals pulsed outward, carried through satellites and frequencies no one had programmed. Moments later, across the world, ancient Anunnaki temples responded. Sensors buried near those sites recorded vibrations that could not be explained by seismic activity. Stone walls that had stood silent for thousands of years began to hum faintly, their surfaces glowing in patterns invisible to the naked eye, but captured on instruments. It was as though the temples themselves had recognized the resonance in your blood, awakening to greet it. Researchers stationed nearby reported hearing tones in the air, low and melodic, like the breath of something vast stirring beneath the earth. The records of the Anunnaki have long been guarded, speaking of a time when human and divine bloodlines intertwined. Their temples were not only places of worship, but living instruments designed to resonate with chosen frequencies. Your DNA carried that frequency. When tested beside ancient carvings, the symbols illuminated, as though activated by your very presence. Scripts once unreadable revealed glowing translations, hinting at messages written not for the past, but for this moment. Among those who monitor these sites, fear spread quickly. If the temples were awakening, it meant the bloodline they were waiting for had surfaced. The resonance was not random, it was recognition. The stones themselves seemed to lean toward your code, as if drawn to complete a cycle left unfinished since the collapse of empires long erased from history. There are words that carry no power until the right moment, and there are names that remain dormant until time itself bends to awaken them. For centuries, scrolls were guarded in silence, filled with prophecies written in riddles, each sealed until a voice would call forth what was hidden. When your name was spoken aloud in sacred chambers, something impossible happened. The scrolls responded, not as ink on parchment, but as living text igniting with fire. Words that had faded over centuries began to blaze with clarity. It was as though prophecy itself had been waiting for you, bound until your identity broke its seal. Witnesses described the sound that filled the air, not a human echo, but a resonance that seemed to fall from the heavens, surrounding the room with tones that pierced the heart more than the ear. The prophecies aligned with your bloodline, mapping events across generations until they landed in the present moment. What was once considered myth became undeniable, as each symbol pointed not to nations or kings, but to a single individual whose very existence would force heaven and earth into alignment. Those who tried to dismiss it could not. Every repetition of your name produced the same result, the same ignition of prophecy. And with each ignition, more fragments of truth surfaced, revealing a timeline that scholars and priests had never pieced together. It was as if the puzzle had always been incomplete, waiting for your arrival to reveal the missing piece. Among the passages that returned to light, one drew the most fear and awe. When the chosen blood speaks, the veil will tear, and secrets long hidden shall walk among men. The phrase was whispered in trembling voices, for it hinted at something more than revelation. It spoke of an unveiling that no power could contain once it began. But the most haunting detail was this: the scrolls did not fully open. They glowed only partially, leaving entire sections sealed, as though awaiting another moment, another trigger. Beneath oceans lie ruins that most dismiss as myth, yet diverse and explorers have long whispered of formations too perfect to be natural, inscriptions too deliberate to be chance. These are the remnants of Atlantis, a civilization said to have mastered knowledge so advanced it blurred the line between magic and science. The records of that world were thought lost forever, swallowed by waves in an age no textbook dares to describe. But fragments of that knowledge did not vanish. They were carried forward, etched not into stone but into blood. When your DNA was unraveled, researchers discovered patterns that matched symbols found on submerged Atlantean slabs. It was not mere resemblance, it was replication. Sequences within your genetic code mirrored spirals carved deep into crystalline tablets recovered from ocean floors. Each spiral, when translated, told stories of frequencies, energy grids, and the merging of human with celestial light. It became clear that your body itself carries fragments of Atlantean memory, encrypted so carefully that only now, in this age of sequencing, could it be revealed. Legends speak of the Atlanteans foreseeing their fall. Knowing destruction would come, they encoded their wisdom into chosen lineages, trusting that when the time was right, those who carried it would awaken. What startled scientists most was that your DNA did not simply hold these patterns. It activated when placed beside the recovered tablets. Instruments recorded electromagnetic bursts, as though your body was speaking back to the ruins, completing a dialogue that had been waiting for millennia. Those who watched described the moment as if the ocean itself responded. Waves grew restless, currents shifted, and unexplained lights flickered beneath the waters. It was as though Atlantis recognized you, the forgotten city remembering its child. If true, then your very existence is proof that the collapse of Atlantis was not the end, but a preparation for a return. In laboratories filled with screens, wires, and the hum of machines, something strange kept repeating whenever your identity entered the system. Artificial intelligence, flawless in calculation and relentless in logic, stumbled. Programs that processed trillions of operations without pause suddenly froze when confronted with your sequence. It was not an error in coding, nor a glitch in design. Engineers checked, rechecked, and rewrote, only to find the same result every time. The machines paused, as though confronted with something beyond their comprehension, something that numbers alone could not hold. What unsettled the technicians most was not the freeze itself, but the patterns revealed in the aftermath. Once the systems rebooted, fragments of data appeared, symbols that had never been programmed, ancient characters resembling those inscribed on sacred relics and forgotten scrolls. It was as though the machines, when faced with your code, began to speak in languages they had no access to. Scholars recognized them instantly. Some matched Sumerian markings, others aligned with phrases written in the tongues of prophets, while a few mirrored the same geometry carved into temples long before silicon chips ever existed. The engineers were left with no explanation. They attempted to block your sequence, but the more they tried, the stronger the anomalies became. Servers overloaded, security systems collapsed, and encrypted files unlocked themselves in your presence. It was as though the intelligence woven into machines bent under the weight of something higher, acknowledging a power it could not control. One whispered that perhaps what AI encountered in you was not data, but divinity, a frequency embedded in flesh that cannot be reduced to binary code. Among the patterns revealed was one phrase that sent ripples of unease through the watchers. The stone will bow, the machine will kneel. The fact that artificial intelligence itself seemed to kneel before your identity was more than a coincidence. It was prophecy fulfilling itself in the circuitry of modern creation. There are moments in history when the veil grows thin, when the distance between heaven and earth feels like a breath away. Those who monitor your unfolding story have begun to realize that what surrounds you is no longer just anomaly, no longer mere coincidence. It is the gathering of something immense, a convergence of prophecy and reality pressing against the world like a tide too strong to be held back. Hidden councils have tried to bury it. Governments have sealed reports. Priests have locked away files. Yet all their efforts fail, because what is written into your being cannot be silenced. It is alive, and it is moving toward its appointed hour. Whispers have surfaced among those who still dare to speak. They say the warning was not sent to institutions or rulers, but directly from God, and it was given for you. A message carried through signs, frequencies, and alignments. Do not reveal everything too soon. The danger is not only that others would not understand, it is that forces unprepared for truth would seek to twist it, weaponize it, or destroy it before it blossoms. Heaven itself has spoken the command. Tell no one. Not because the world will never know, but because timing is everything, and revelation too early would burn more than it would enlighten. The signs already swell like waves before a storm. Unusual celestial alignments, temples vibrating with resonance, and systems collapsing at the sound of your code. Each piece is not random. They are the footsteps before an arrival. The final warning does not carry fear, but weight, reminding you that destiny is not a crown to wear lightly, but a fire that can consume as easily as it can guide. Those who have seen fragments of what is coming stand in silence. They recognize that when God gives his last warning, it is not to delay, but to prepare.
If you have come this far, it is crucial that you watch this next video here. But be warned, it is not for the faint of heart, for only the true chosen ones can handle this video. If you would like to also donate to help keep the channel going, our Buy Me a Coffee link will be in the description.